Alrighty, welcome everybody. Welcome Internet. We're back on the Giant. We're going to be trying to tackle and get this last little bit for him up and running, just so that we can send him over into the submission section and see if he gets approved to move forward for animation. So we're going to be wrapping up some of the hair stuff today. I want to add in a couple more details and stuff, like more beat up and just damage on his legs and feet. That's kind of where we'll be what we'll be tackling here. I also need to just finish up on this this loincloth sort of deal, just to get that kind of wrapped up. And I think once we hit all of those points, then he'll be ready for submission. So, but I'm just working on my therapeutic sesh again, doing some little hair curly cues and such to kind of get this wrapped up. And then hopefully from there, yeah, we'll knock that out. How's it going, Talit? Welcome, welcome, welcome. Started a little bit later than I wanted today, but you know, sometimes you gotta do life things. Like clean up my apartment and do all that sort of jazz. Also, I need to make sure that everything's okay there. Alright, that all looks good. Gravy, gravy, gravy. Okay. Howdy, welcome. Thanhauser, how's your weekend going? Oh man. Well, thanks for joining me during your study time, or if you're just chilling and needing a relaxing moment to recharge from that, for sure. Howdy! Glad some of y'all are able to join me on this very cloudy, rainy Saturday for most of us. Oops, that's not what I wanted at all. I'll mess with that later. The good news is we're starting to wrap down on this hair, though. That's the great part. So once we get done with that, I just got a handful of little bits and bobs to take care of, and then he'll be ready for submission. If I do run out of things to noodle on this guy, I might actually start. I'm going to be doing the tarantula next. So Zukin was kind enough to send me his spider model, so I can kind of take a look at that. And then see if I can use some of that to start building out the tarantula. So if any of you are arachnophobic, that's just a heads up right there. You never know. Woolly spiders, yes. Howdy. Welcome, welcome. How's your weekend going, Keith? It's going good. Started a little bit later than I wanted to, but I had to do some house cleaning. I got some family coming into town this next week, so I need to make sure that that's all ready to go. Don't want my family to look at me and go, "You live in squalor and filth. What's going on?" Howdy, Nick. I am doing good. Just need to get this hair completed. We're really close to getting pretty done on this guy, so still need to just a little bit more detailing. Need to knock out just the last little bits of this hair, so that way it can slot in for or jump into the approval channel, and hopefully this guy can start getting animated. Or, you know, I'll have to make some adjustments and stuff, but if all goes well today and I'm able to knock out the rest of this, just a little bit of leg stuff and the hair on that, and then just do a little bit more detailing on his loincloth, then I should be able to start working on the woolly spiders. Yeah, he'll be grayscale because he's gonna get the same lerping skin stuff that all the other characters get. I built him a little bit more out like a character and less just like a one-off monster. So I had talked to Zukin about that, and we kind of figured that might be the best way to handle him, or the giants, to see if I could get him to fit basically on the player character texture and see if we could do that. So, and it seemed like it would work really well for this dude, so that was the idea behind that. Oh, sure, I can pop that up a little bit. I have control over these things. There we go. Pop that up about 10%. If that sounds better, that's great. And if not, I can always adjust it further. Perfect, perfect. Oh, okay. Well, hopefully that solved that issue. So, no worries there. If I'm still quiet, let me know. I will make more adjustments. It's not like anything I say is very important anyway. I'm just here for the entertainment value, right? So, don't stress too much about it. Oop! My symmetry was already off. Haha. There we go. Let me get a better view of that underside of that leg. Makes it easier to texture under here. Right? Exactly. Sand giants don't have a lot of, time in their life to be dealing with shaving and that sort of stuff. They've got too much gnome kicking to do. You wonder if gnomes for giants are kind of like the butter robot in Rick and Morty, where it's like, what is your purpose? And it's to bring the giants butter and like wash between their toes and stuff. Like that's their sole purpose. Right? Anybody else got any fun summer plans coming up? It's starting to get that time where people go and do stuff for summer times. There you go. That's kind of what I had talked about a little while ago, where it's like, you need to find a gnome. He was lost out in the desert, right? And then I had just said, like, a giant had found him and put him in his, like, little backpack, or his little, like, pouch or satchel or something. And when you defeat the giant, a gnome pops out and then has a quest for you to escort him back to where he needs to be. Because he's been stuck in the giant's rucksack satchel for like a month, but there was like food and stuff in there for him to eat, you know, because it's all giant sized. It wasn't good, but he lived. I just had a rando thought while I was just thinking about this, where if you get like wagons or pack mules and stuff, can they get damaged? If they get damaged, do you need to find like parts to repair them or something like that? Oh my gosh, are we turning this into the AT-AT scene from Star Wars? Oh, I'm in for that too. Just saying, that'd be pretty slick. Howdy, Dargon. Just saw you slip in there. Well, that's the thing for like the wagons and stuff. I was thinking if the wagons could get damaged, right, and they're at a non-functional state, could you find pieces and parts to like ramshackle repair them, you know, back to a functional state? Yeah, exactly. Kind of that deal. Or hey, we fought this giant and he dropped like not a full wagon wheel, but like a round shield, and maybe you could, sacrifice the shield as a wheel, and do weird stuff like that. You found a barrel top. Maybe we can fashion that as a wheel. I cast summon wheel. So it's a very specific spell that I learned just for this scenario, but it's worth it. So what is going to be our pet class in our game? Is that going to be the Beastmaster, or is there going to be one that, or I mean Necromancer too, right? But like, who is going to be able to have the maximum amount of pets, right? Like, I want like 10 pets that I can just lay waste to everything. Wagon Mancer, yeah, exactly. Squirrel Army, dude. Well, I know that they can all spawn creatures, right? But the question is which one can spawn the most creatures? Or does everybody just get one? Everybody gets one, right? Everybody gets one. Oh, there you go. I mean, I could see that, like, having summoning magic is very taxing, right? I could see summoning magic being something that you have to concentrate on, so maximum get one, maybe two, right? It's not like I did summoning magic and now I have them forever. It requires that control over the creature for you to be able to, use them. So I could see that. It'd be cool if there was something that an item you could get, or a spec that you could go into, or something like that, where it's like you could add one additional summon, for a certain class, or, that's their specialty, where they could get additional summonings. But then they have to concentrate on that additional summon, right? So it makes it so, if there's a buff that I can cast or something and that requires me to focus on it, then I can't do my additional summon. But if I want the additional summon, then cool, we get an extra guy, right? And that's powerful in and itself, so it breeds more player choice about how they want to handle stuff. Sure, makes sense. It was more of a general open question and topic for discussion, right? True, true. I mean, it is important to have balance, but you can find that zone where everything is kind of feels good, not overpowered, but that takes time to be able to get that proper balance between classes and abilities and characters and stuff, so. Sure. Yeah, I mean that makes sense. You know, you fight the dog warden or whatever, and he has like 2 hounds that are with him, and those are his pets, right? That makes sense, right? But that was just something to think about, where it's like it would be a neat thing to be able to build upon that idea of a summoning class, but it could get overpowered and out of control really quickly, right? You get 4 necromancers together, each one can summon 2 guys. Now you've got like all these additional mobs that are tanking and doing things and that sort of stuff. It could get pretty unruly pretty quick. So I get that everybody gets 1 rule. You know, that makes sense. But then I would say that everybody gets 1 rule kind of opens up the idea of then it's worth having multiple types of summons, right? And that way you now have a lot of flexibility in that regard, right? Which summon am I bringing with me as one of the summoner classes? You know, is it a character that just buffs us? Is it a mob that fires from range? Is it a side tank? Is it, you know, so it does open a lot of choice just for the everybody gets 1 route. Sure. I mean, it could even be something where your pet is a non-combatant. Your second pet isn't a combatant pet, right? It's a buffer pet, and that doesn't get into, you know, melee or combat or any sort of that. It just like provides a buff. So now you've got 1 pet that does buff, 1 pet that does, you know, attack and defense and can, or tank or whatever, you know, and you could kind of build stuff around that where, you know, you have kind of different abilities, or maybe it has like a roar that kind of adds class stats or whatever, you know, whatever we want to do with that. But then you kind of take out the fact that, oh, well, we can get all these characters and then, you know, it becomes a balancing issue and a tank issue and there's all these players on screen. But we could pare that back slightly, right? Yeah, multiple thrall. You could do some like a you know, the necromancer can summon imp, and the imp spawns and casts a couple of spells and poofs back into his you know, world or whatever, right? Or the Beastmaster summons in like a hawk, and the hawk comes and it swoops in and does like a little swoop attack, right? And then maybe screeches and, you know, causes the target to lose some attack stats and then flies away, right? I mean, you can do a lot of different stuff with that sort of stuff with like Beastmaster or that sort of stuff with the temp summons. I like that a lot. Yep, you summon two ferrets and they latch onto their legs and purr vigorously at whatever the target is. Oh, dude, that movie is underrated. I will just say that. It's a great movie. Oh yeah, there's like a million good fantasy movies, like especially from the '80s. Like surprisingly, that they might have not have gotten the recognition that they needed up front, but man, they're good. They were actually pretty good. There was also some really bad ones. Don't get me wrong, right? But they're not all gemstones, but I will say that there are some good ones. I mean, back in that era, they just made them differently. Having scary movies and things that freaked you out, especially in like sci-fi films, or you know, they really focused on like the weird and strange, which I think makes those movies really cool, right? Like even Conan, right, had like the death and resurrection scene with him, and they had like all the spirits and stuff, and you look at movies like Willow or never ending story kind of stuff. It's like they took more risks with the movies, right? And I think they weren't afraid of making things be scary or weird or grotesque sometimes, but at the same token they took the risk to do it, and it's in this day and age it's much harder to do that. I will say Val Kilmer literally made that character, right? That was the whole thing. I think that was kind of one of those like Iron Man, Robert Downey Jr. perfect casting kind of things where Val Kilmer was like the perfect call for that character in particular, right? I think that was one of those ones where you wouldn't have gotten as iconic of a character in that movie for Mad Morgan in Willow, then it was all because they had that cast. That one casting made it. Right? Yeah, I mean, like, it really, I don't think that movie would have been as strong with another actor, for real. Sometimes you just nail that casting, and that's what makes the role so dang good, right? Granted, could you have found a better actor through any series that would be better? Sure. You know, you look at movies where people really were like down on the casting for the actor that they picked, and then it turns out that they were phenomenal, right? Like Heath Ledger in Dark Knight for the Joker, everybody was like, remember when that they picked him, and everybody was like, this is gonna suck. He's a terrible pick, and it turns out to be, he was like absolutely phenomenal in that role, right? Like, that's just one of those things where sure, you might be able to find a better actor later down the line, but like for that role at the time that it was chosen, the actor that they chose did an amazing job. You know, that's kind of one of those things where it's like it's hard to go, okay, who would fill that role better? But yeah. Did anybody end up watching the series? I did not. I heard it wasn't great. See, Nick, me being the DM that I am, the thing that I enjoy is being the one that comes up with the scenario where you do have that look, and then you do throw yourself onto the monster, try to do the cool thing, right? I do very much love creating that story and building that scenario for the players to experience, right? That's what brings a lot of enjoyment for me when I'm doing DMing and stuff. I see. Yeah, that was kind of a downer because I had high hopes for that, and then, you know, internet goes, "This was bad," and I was wondering if that was actually true. Can't always trust the internet, but it's kind of one of those things where, yeah, might as well just ask, see if it's actually good these days. Kind of like the Fallout series, it was interesting. I had an interesting conversation with one of my friends on the Fallout series. I watched it. I liked it. I enjoyed it. I agree it's got some problems, especially like there's certain story elements that I wasn't a big fan of. But at the same token, I think as an overall product and what it was, and I think some of the forest is getting lost through the trees, right? If that makes sense. Um, but I think overall it was a really strong show. I mean, it's not a 10 out of 10, but it's a solid like 8.5, 9 in my opinion, right? You know, you can have your qualms, and if you're an absolute lore evangelist, right? I can see that you could have your problems with it, right? And that's totally fine. You know, it doesn't have to be the perfect show, but it was a very good show. Um, I will say that, you know, the Brotherhood story arc wasn't as strong as I thought it would be, but I think there's a lot of things that they're not mentioning in the show that are kind of implied, but as the audience, have to go, oh, I played Fallout. I know all the lore, and so it makes sense. But I think if you didn't know anything about the series and you didn't really know anything, you wouldn't really get it, and it would just feel odd. So I think like the brotherhood part of the story could have been a little bit stronger, especially for audience people that didn't know the story. Just to try to clarify that a little bit better. Well, that was the weird thing in our conversation was like they felt like it was really corny and goofy. I'm like, did you play the Fallout series? Did you go through the whole thing? Like, the whole premise is goofy and weird, right? And if you play more and more, as you play through the series, like in totality, you start learning all the things that are brought up in the show. And it makes, if you've played the games, it makes perfect sense, right? But if you haven't played the games or you only have like a loose recognition for what the games were, or like the very first game interpretation, which was like what it was supposed to be, you know, I could see how it wouldn't be as strong. But if you've played the games a bunch, you know that it's a goofy mess of story arcs, right? And that's like the whole point. And then, you know, one of the critiques was, oh, the violence was so gratuitous. I was like, have you used the VAT system? Didn't you watch it? Well, like when you shoot them, they just explode, right? On a critical. It's like the gore, the unrealistic gore and weirdness was like the whole point. So it was just a really weird discussion about why people the people didn't really like it, that they were like off put by the high amounts of gore and stuff, and I was like, I was just laughing, man. I thought that was amazing. You know, that you have this world with magical drugs that just fix your injuries if you get injected with them. That was the whole hilarity about it. I agree. I do think some of the episodes were not well paced at all, and I think that is an absolutely okay criticism to have on that. And that's kind of what I was getting at too, was um with the Brotherhood story arc and that sort of stuff. I could see how people would get like confused, or like delivery for those characters is very strange. Um, you know, because they're supposed to be these very sheltered characters that don't really know. They grew up only with the Brotherhood, so they don't really understand the world. But like we as the audience need to get brought along in that these people don't really know what's, you know, like what is proper etiquette and that sort of thing. But you know, unless you play the games, you wouldn't know that. You know, they have this high amount of like reprogramming for the Brotherhood and stuff. But yeah, the pacing was very up and down. But that's why I said it's still a good show. So you can't like, you can nick it for certain stuff, and that's why it's like, yeah, it's a solid like 8.5, 9, somewhere in there, right? Like, it is not the most perfect show. It's also season 1, and it's one of those things where I hope they get more season. I hope they start being able to get into their stride, right? And I think that it'll be really awesome. Very few shows are like, you know, gonna be as good as like Firefly was right off the rip. You know, where all the characters have great chemistry, the writing's perfect, the acting's perfect, right? The story was really fun to go along on, right? You know, that was, you know, sometimes shows need a little warm up. Yeah, I mean, that's fantastic. I'm glad, you know, Bethesda has not been hitting the mark lately, so I'm glad that they're gaining a little bit more traction, and hopefully that will give them and afford them more opportunity to, you know, get their other products to be a little bit more improved. Because as of late, they've been taking a couple of L's, and it'd be good. It's nice that they're getting a W for this one, you know, to bolster that side. So I will say that the premise for Fallout is still fantastic. You know, it makes a really fun show, right? Dude, an Eminem freaking animated series. So would be so cool. The hard part about that is like, who would the characters be, right? We need to get some solid NPCs and story arcs and stuff once people start going through it, and then we'd have to like build around that sort of stuff. Because it's hard to do that with like an MMO just because it's so open. You know, there's no main character or anything to really build off of. But I guess, hell, if World of Warcraft can do it, we could too. I mean, I think it'd be kind of cool to do different characters where you kind of like build them up through the season and then like into a event that's happening in the world would be interesting, right? The problem being is if you make some really like phenomenal characters that people really like if you ended up developing out some like killer ass characters, suddenly you're like, well, and now we're going to ditch those ones and make new ones. And you don't know if those are, once again, it's not like a proven quantity. And so is the audience going to follow along for like a new set of characters, or are they going to want those original ones, or one or two that really were awesome? You know, but it would be kind of neat to do different stories from the different eras and stuff through Eminem or whatever is going to get developed, right? Through the different events that would happen, right? That'd be kind of cool. Interesting idea. Really, I didn't know that that's how they developed some of the Fallout lore. That's pretty dope. Dang, you learn something every day. Don't give them any ideas. All right, just a little bit more on this, and we'll be done with the hair stuff, which I'm a little bit excited for. And we'll wrap up the cloth stuff, and then I think that'll be it. I don't really... I want to do some skin blemishes and that sort of stuff, a little bit of detailing on that. But I think overall, like, we're getting to the point where we could be like, put them in for submission to get that check mark, you know? Okay, I have to be... I think it's because I got a cape or something going on here, right? I do not. Oh, am I an eraser? I am. That's what it is. Oh, the poster behind me? That's StarCraft 2. And then my posters over here, a bunch of... I got like some Critical Role... These are Critical Role posters. So... Sadly, I did not work on any of those projects, but I love their artwork, and yay. Why not have them be wall art? Yeah, that'd be pretty slick. I'm not gonna lie. I stumbled across them very early on when they were... I think it was... I can't remember if it was episode 1 or episode 2 when I legit started watching them right off the start. And I was like, this is phenomenal. It got me back into D&D. I hadn't really played D&D in a long time. And yeah, it was great. I'm really glad I got to get started on their show super early when they first started out, because it was a blast. Oh yeah, for sure. That was back in the Geek and Sundry days. Absolutely. I am definitely a big proponent of their show. I think it's phenomenal. You know, they do a really good job. It's very fun. Do I love every episode that they do or whatever? You know, are they kind of goofy and ridiculous sometimes? Sure. But I think overall they do a really good service for, you know, the tabletop RPG scene. And, you know, Matt Mercer really showed me how to be a good DM. You know, not having anybody to, like, show you how to do DMing, you know, it was kind of neat to see it from another perspective. The one thing I always wish that we could get would be I'd love to see his notes. I'd love to see how he actually physically takes notes as a DM. Like, does he write in shorthand? Does he, like, how when he's doing an adventure, when he's setting up the story, right? When you're doing your prep for an adventure, right? I'd love to just, like, sit and see what other people do to see if I'm like, am I taking too much time on my prep? Am I writing out too much? Am I getting too descriptive with some things? Is there some places where I could do better? I mean, sure, you can always do a better job, but, like, where are those, like, sticking points for me to be a better DM or, like, story writer or that sort of thing? You know, I'd love to see. That's one thing that I'd love to get more feedback on for me. Is like, where can I improve in those elements, right? Yeah, but it was fun to be able to, I watched the first episodes or whatever, and it got me really like jazzed on going back into my. I had written a D&D story ages, like when I was still in high school, and I had written it all out, and I still had all the old notebooks and stuff that I had. And I went back through and I cracked open my old notebooks and looked at everything. I was like, this is really bad. But there's a lot of really good ideas in here. And so I nabbed all of that and I started rewriting not only like the world, but all of the places and setting up like really descriptive, uh, like paragraphs and stuff for my adventure and getting all that all kind of like reorganized and stuff, and then like reframed it into a new adventure. And I called all my old D&D friends that had played that original campaign with me, and they were all on board, and so we all started playing my original campaign again, like revamped and redone and everything. Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm still the biggest season one fan. If you're gonna watch Critical Role, if you're gonna do any of that, watch the first season of Critical Role. It's it's great because it's hundreds and hundreds of hours of just like great entertainment. The story's phenomenal. You know, I love season one. Season one's still my favorite. Season two, season three, I'm kind of shrug on them. I think season two got way better at the end, but it started real rough for me. Like, I was not a big fan. And I think that's mostly just because I came from season one. And the thing about season one, I think that it still sits as like such a strong show for them, is their characters were the actors, right? They weren't making a new character that they just wanted to play. They had made themselves as characters, basically. And so it wasn't like them acting. It was when a character got killed or when something bad would happen in season one, it wasn't happening to their character, it was happening to them themselves, right? And so their reactions were so much more interesting because it's how they would react, right? That's how their character would, um, and that's what I find so fascinating about season one of Critical Role compared to the latter seasons now, where they're phenomenal actors and they take on their personas and stuff. But I think the difference in season one is they weren't playing different characters, it was them playing the game. And that's what made it so interesting to me. Yeah, yeah. I mean, the hard part for me, yeah, and that's kind of why it kind of hit me a little bit more. I mean, even in season two, I felt like it was like, oh, they're playing different characters now. That they chose these characters because they're more interesting to act. Totally get that, right? But that's why season one to me again was so powerful, because again the reactions and stuff that they were having were their personal reactions instead of what is the actions and motivations of my character, which is a different feel, right? Well, yeah, that too. I think that's the other thing that they Critical Role is kind of building on their success by putting together their own TT, RPG, right? And so they want to have the highest amount of flexibility for players to be able to play, and I think that's why they, especially for season three, went with such weird characters. Is because when Daggerheart comes out, they want to have like an absolute insane amount of different characters that you can play, like races and stuff, to be able to like accommodate anything that you'd want to do, be, or whatever. I think it loses a little bit because again, I am very much a traditionalist in my like in my RPG setting. So it's like Dragonborn, super freaking rare. Like you might meet one in a lifetime. You know, and so when players are like, I want to play Dragonborn, I'm like, just know that you're going to be ostracized through most cities and nobody's going to like you because you're one of the dragons, right? Like you're an abomination monster, right? And that's kind of how that should get played. And yeah, so I always warn players, for me, because I do play in a very traditional style where it's like, yeah, it should be your main races are like humans, elves, dwarves, halflings, right? And even dwarves are kind of like, well, they're not everywhere, but you know, they live in their mountain and do their things, and they have their trade routes, and they'll be in some areas, but you know, your main thing will be like halflings, humans, elves, and you know, sometimes dwarves, gnomes, I guess. But I'm also like, yeah, I mean, those are, again, they live in they have their own like communities and shit. You're not gonna get many of those like, oh, I want to go on my adventuring thing, right? Gnomes are like hobbits to me. Classical fantasy. Right. Where it's like, it's weird because Daggerheart to me feels like this super just open world where you can be whatever you want wherever and it does not matter, right? It is like this super, like all the races intermingle and that's fine. And it's like, it still feels weird to me that it would be like that in a fantasy setting. We don't even get that in the real life, so you know, there would be battle lines and certain races wouldn't like each other, and you know, it just, more strife is good. The world is strife. The fantasy world is strife. That makes more believable and interesting story, you know, to me personally, where you know, the interworkings of these cultures is not always great, right? Yeah, which makes way more intriguing stories and places to be. I mean, for me, Dragonborn, it depends on what type of Dragonborn you choose. I mean, you know, the thing about chromatics is they're normally like more on the evil side, so it's like, they wouldn't even, it's weird to me that they go, oh yes, you can be, you know, one of the chromatic races for Dragonborn. The the chromatics don't even like humans. They think they're inferior creatures. It boggles my mind that those are even options to choose. Well, and I agree with Nick's comment there, where I think, yes, they're trying to make a show, but at the same time, they're all actors, and that's one thing we have to think about when we're watching the show. And again, that's one of the reasons why I still feel that the first season is so interesting to me, is because again, they weren't playing characters. They had their own characters' voices, and because they're all talented actors, but those characters in particular were the characters that they made as their own persona. Yeah, when you make your first character, you make yourself, right? And those were like their first D&D characters ever, and so most of them just made themselves, right? And they played them, you know, that's how you kind of like, but then you're like, oh, I want to play a different character, right? And I want to be more creative with it and do all that sort of stuff. And that was season 2. And now season 3 is kind of like we want to be really wild with our characters and just do some crazy shit, right? And so it's like each episode is kind of, or season has kind of had its own interactions for Critical Role in particular, right? You know, I think the second season was definitely all of the players going, I want to play something different and interesting and, you know, but still keep it grounded. Now this last season is just like, we want to be insane. Sure, go ahead. Yeah, well, Ryan Akaba is a interesting cat, and you know, I think he definitely rubbed people the wrong way. I have a hard time watching his episodes, man. And not to come down on the guy or nothing, because like he, I think his main thing, and I know that everybody is like a different actor kind of thing. I think he suffered from the same thing that happened with me when I started first watching Critical Role. Is that he got way too into his character, like so far into his character that he bothered other players, right? And you can't go that far. He went a little bit over the top there, and that's was the biggest issue. Um, you know, be it whatever was going on in his personal life or any sort of that sort of stuff, that's totally different. But when he played in character all of the time. And the other issue is that he didn't like when players were getting upset or there were issues or whatever, he wouldn't back off of that, right? Because he was staying in character. And that's one of the things is sometimes you as a player have to adjust how you're playing based on the accommodations of other players, right? And I think that's where you have to have a little bit of that self-awareness, because I did the first time when I started watching Critical Role, I was playing like a wild elf druid, and we were playing in this campaign, and I'm like, I need to play him like I'd play the characters and stuff, and like I started rubbing the players that were in that campaign the wrong way, and then like there was like a session where my DM was like, "Yo, you're getting way too into this." I'm like, "Ooh, I'm getting, I'm burrowing into how my character needs to feel and stuff, and not realizing that it's rubbing people the wrong way." And so like the next couple of sessions, I stood back from that a little bit. I'm like, "Oh yeah, I needed to make some adjustments in how I played and how my character was acting and stuff, because yeah, the way that I was doing stuff was not the right way." So that was a learning experience for me. I don't play that often in terms of characters and stuff. Normally I'm like writing the story and making sure the encounters are adequately powered and making sure that the story the enemies have proper motivations and figuring that sort of stuff out. So and then I need to play those characters, and so like I get really into the acting part of that whole thing. And then when you're DMing, you don't have to worry about that as much with other people, right? Because you're like, I'm just unfolding the story for you instead of having to like cooperate and work with you. Yeah. Personally, I've been lucky enough that I've never really had personality issues with anybody or any issues like that. That's been at least good. And I think the main thing is as long as your like DM can pull a person aside if they're really causing an issue or something, and they can have an earnest one-on-one with you, and they can take that to heart and make adjustments. Like that's the whole point, right? Um, but yeah, I mean, like overall, I've not had. I mean, like I've been lucky enough that a lot of my good friends that I've made through the years like enjoy D&D as well, and so it hasn't really been an issue where we've had like bad players. It just was like, yeah, it was like when it was first starting out, coming back to being a character and stuff. I was like, oh, I got to get like super into character, and then you lose the forest of the trees sometimes there. Again, I think Ryan Akaba. The one thing is he just needed to take a little step back from his character and just be more self-aware. you know, about like what he was doing and what his actions were causing and that sort of thing. And I know that's really hard sometimes, but you know, again, if you pull a player aside and go, "Yo, you need to like take this back a step," then you should be able to take that to heart and go, "Okay, I need to readdress those things," you know, and for the sake of the game and the fun and the other people that are playing the game with me, right? It was really cool though. Just recently, my buddy Ryan, he hosted a one shot for us, and I ended up making this character, which was like this warlock that had like the change face ability, and I had had this character in mind for like years and years and years, and just never made it. And when I put it all together, oh my god, it was so fun to play. Like I had the armor that you could change. You could change your outfit to look like whatever you wanted, and then he could change his face to look like whatever he wanted. It was fantastic. I had so much fun playing that character. Well, I can't really make them go down in terms of like where they're at. I mean, they look fine to me positionally. If I have a loose fist slightly open, that looks pretty close to like what I'm thinking that hand looks like. You know, like I've got the gaps, I've got the claw, the thumb hangs over the top. Seems like that's about what that is. I can't do it any different from that. I'm not seeing where the issue is. Especially when I have been using my hand as a reference. I know that when you hold your fingers together, right, like technically when you have your hands out, right, middle finger is longer, right, and does that and stuff, but when you close your palms, they're all kind of the same, especially if you're holding something, and I'm treating it as he's holding an object or something, because he's going to need to be holding that. So, I mean, sure, could I make this like a little bit more like circular? Yeah. I mean, there's some things you could do to make that like a little bit of an adjustment. I don't think it's enough to like warrant a ton of repainting or anything like that. I appreciate the look at it though. You know, like again, looking back and forth, it's looking pretty okay. I don't need his hands to be like super tight and together either, right? He's just holding an object loosely, so I mean, it just makes it so it's kind of like the same. I'm not thinking has his fists so balled up that it's all tight like that. I have him more like loosely holding a thing. Plus, the other issue I was kind of running into is if I make it look like his fist is very tight and balled up like that, his fingers get really thick, right? His fingers get really, really big, and that was another thing that was kind of feeling odd to me, is that you have characters that all of a sudden have these really strange, abnormally large fingers, just because then they need to fill the entire space, and that's something that's kind of, I wasn't sure on. But I think this is the best way to kind of do it, because it keeps it so I can regulate finger size and not go, oh, he needs to have these gigantic ass fingers, which turn into these like mega sausages. You know, I think that keeps them more regulated. So I think overall it's okay. I'll put a little bit of pushback there on the changing the hands and stuff, but I think you are correct. Like if I want to make them a little bit looser, this should be a little bit more rounded in here for sure. So I can agree on that one. I can agree on that. A little bit of a change on that on the hands, right? So totes. The one thing about doing these hands like this too is like typically this would be a lot thinner, right? Like this would be like way thinner back here, but there's no way I can like transition the palm of this back and then make that look natural enough. It's always going to have this weird, there's like just a big old pancake back here because, you know, there's no way to like angle this better. You know, and it's really hard to paint that and make the light of the skin and stuff kind of like feel like that's natural. I appreciate the call on that, though, for sure. I mean, it's something you really got to think about. Oop. Oh no. You're fine with the critiques and stuff. It's just one of those things I've thought about the hands a lot. So I mean, like this is kind of where I ended up. So it's you're fine with the critique. I think that is an acceptable thing. I was just trying to explain like why I made the choice that I made. It doesn't mean you're wrong here for sure. It's just one of those things where I've painted now a set of hands, and I was kind of feeling like this is the right spot to land on, from my point of view. It doesn't mean I'm right either, so. Nah, again, I feel okay with the critiques, man. Don't stress too hard about that. Don't come down on that. Just because I'm not 100% on that, but I think that's why I was kind of going through why did I do it this way? You know, it just makes it so that if he's holding different stuff, I'm not held into, he's got a tightly balled fist, and it makes it a little bit more open to what it might need to be. But it also feels like the most natural to me as well. Like I said, I think your critique is perfectly valid and acceptable. So I just don't think I'm gonna push that direction too much differently. Yeah, well, and that's kind of why, you know, it's going to be weird because if he's holding something, you're not going to be able to see it through the hands and stuff. But again, it's more about the theater of mind, and not fully restricting myself with, I need to fill in this full space with exactly, you know, I don't need to fill this exactly to the full extent with, like, in terms of the fingers, right? The space can be left a little bit open so that way they can feel you know, a little bit more natural and stuff in terms of like how their hands and stuff are. A big part of this too is trying to paint in the definition that you want to have without it looking super freaking weird, you know? Because if you look at these parts in aggregate, right, like this section is a piece, this section is a piece, this, but I'm hoping that when you look at it from like a distance at an angle, suddenly you're getting like, oh, there's like an actual thumb here that almost feels kind of 3D based on what it is, which is a very challenging thing to pull that definition out of just a bunch of flat faces. But when you look at it in at an angle, it actually fits correctly. You know, that is a very challenging thing to do, is to paint that depth into a model like that, where, you know, because the thing is like, as soon as I start painting, see how this is starting to distort? Well, I'm painting it as if it's like rounding this corner, but I can't do that because it freaks out. So I have to, it's one of those things where like you make sacrifices in certain spots for the texture, but other spots you just kind of have to go, okay, well that's just how it has to be. That's the hard part about hand painting things, for sure. I think critiques are valid though. I mean, that's one of the things where, you know, you don't get better as an artist if you don't take critiques properly. So I think there's a little valid thought of, you know, the fingers could use a little bit more improvement. Totally. Definitely put a little bit of another level of polish in here, and I think that'll help a lot. So. I think that's feeling a little bit better. let's jump back to the hair again. Get these legs done. Still got a little bald spot over here. What time is it? Shoot. All right. I might have to put in one more hour. I forgot my buddy is out of town. I have to go take his dog out. Ugh. Okay. I'm glad I remembered though. That would have been really bad. He's like, "Why is my dog laying with its legs all up in the air like that?" I'm like, "I don't know what happened." You sure it wasn't that way when you left him? Oh goodness. All right. It'll be fine. His dog was fine. Yesterday when I took him out for the walk and stuff, he had plenty of food, all the water, everything was great. I just, it's gotten a little bit late, so I need to go back over there. All right, yeah, I'll put in 30 more minutes just because I want to go over there and take care of it, but that's okay. I wanted to go a little bit longer, but this is fine. This is acceptable. Also just realized I must have nicked something and turned the music off, so my apologies there as well. It's kind of one of those things. I know that some people need music to do work and stuff, or like when they're doing their art and whatever. But like, man, for me, it's very much like I can sit in absolute dead silence and just like work and just focus on stuff. So sorry about that. It's kind of more of a me issue. True. Yeah, I can see that. It has to be, for me, it has to be movies that I've watched a bunch, and then I don't need to watch them, you know? But it has to be one of those, like, really favorite movies that I very much enjoy, that I've already watched, you know, a million times, and so I don't get distracted then when I watch them. Or just, well, what I'll do is I'll, like, play them and then minimize them so I get at least the sound and the jokes and stuff, but I don't need to watch the video then. pretty good. Hell yeah. Alright, let's see. I want to paint that cloth a little bit, and then symmetry, make sure that's all gravy. Absolutely. Absolutely just a bucket ton of burlap, man. Yay! I'm glad you guys dig it. For sure. It is a lot of work to go through and do all this stuff to get these characters ready to go. Oh, nice. We need to make like a Brawny Man commercial now, and then these dudes will sell you paper towels for all your spills and shit, right? Like... Yes, I am currently using 3D Code in a Cintiq. That is correct. 3D Code is very good for doing hand painting stuff, so it's been my primary tool for many, many years. In the previous video, I did tell the story about how I got my Cintiq, which I was lucky enough to have worked at a previous studio that had a bunch of layoffs, and so they had a bunch of Cintiqs that were being basically unused. And one of my previous coworkers, I was really good friends with him, they were going to be selling the Cintiqs, right? And it was an allotment of one per person, right? And so you could put yourself in for a lot, and then they would sell you a Cintiq for like $500, which is like nothing in the Cintiq world. So my buddy contacted me and goes, "Hey, I already have a Cintiq. Do you want one?" And I go, "Hell yeah, you can get me one of those, please." And so he ended up getting me a Cintiq. And so I used that for like a couple of years, and I ended up moving to Seattle. I got a job up there. And while I was up there, you know, I was making some pretty decent money and stuff. And finally I was like, ooh, you know what? Well, it all started out because I ordered a swing arm. That's the one thing I will suggest. If you have a Cintiq, swing arm, huge help. I was having a lot of shoulder issues because I had it like up on my desk. And so I was like this all day. And man, it wrecked my shoulder, right? And so... I bought the swing arm because I was assuming that it would just work with their Cintiq, like all of their Cintiqs. Nope. It was a swing arm that only worked with the new Cintiqs. And I couldn't take it back. So I was like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to order a new Cintiq. The first thought I had was, I'll just sell my old Cintiq, right? And then I'll get a new one. So that it works with this stupid swing arm. And then I'll have a new version that is in, you know, it doesn't have as many miles on it, right? Yeah, basically. So I bought my Cintiq originally the first iteration for like $500, and I sold it for 1,000, so I made $500, and then I rolled that money that I had gotten for my old Cintiq into a new one, and so that's how I got this Cintiq. So I got it for like, you know, half off basically. So that's my Cintiq story, and yay. Because that's the one weird thing about Cintiqs, man. They hold their value way longer than they should, but hey, I'm down with it. I mean, I took really good care of mine too, so it was basically brand new anyway. They didn't get a bad deal for that Cintiq, you know, because I took real good care of that one in particular. Because at the time at which I got it, I was unsure if I'd ever get another one, you know? So I was babying that thing like crazy. It's also insane because my buddy who got the first one for me, he was using like a Gen 1 Cintiq. Like he still has that original version, and he's still running that thing. It's like, dang, dude, that's pretty crazy. Yes, I agree. It is a huge, you know, I recommend if people are ever going to start out in games and stuff, just get a tablet. A Cintiq is not required for you to like do this work, right? This is for, okay, I've been working in the industry, you know, I got a job in the industry, this is now my primary source of income, that sort of thing. Then if you feel like you want to get a Cintiq, I highly recommend like get like a tablet or something first and sketch on that and see how that feels, because some people don't like working on Cintiqs, right? They are not down with the pen on the thing. They like the separation of the tablet versus the monitor, and they don't really click with that. So, you know, before you make that big major purchase, I highly recommend, you know, borrowing somebody's tablet. Get somebody or that has like a you know, like an Apple tablet, or like and see if you can borrow it from them to do some painting on that. Because yeah, I don't recommend it for everybody because some people don't like it. I like it. I prefer painting on the Cintiq. I can use a tablet. I go back to tablet on occasion, but I prefer painting on Cintiq for sure. But yes, it is a big commitment in terms of the price tag and, you know, versus what are you comfortable with. Yeah, I mean, that was kind of my thing too, is I can use tablet. I started out on tablet, right? I got used to the disconnect of the tablet, you know, on when I was painting and stuff, but I highly recommend, like, if you really like to draw and sketch on paper, you'll probably like drawing and sketching on a Cintiq more than a tablet. But again, that really does come down to personal preference, because some people just get really used to their tablets and they love that disconnect, and they don't like going back to or using a Cintiq at all. Man, I can't wait to see these guys just stomping around in the glass flats and just be like, oh god, I can't walk over there. There's a sand giant working his way around on the road. Or I can't wait to like walk through the world and then just see like 30 players just fighting this sand giant out in the desert, man. It's gonna be a real cool scene to like walk up on one of that, you know? Just the layers of bodies just littered on the ground right in front of a sand giant and be like, yeah, I made that. He crushed all those people. All right, 10 minutes, 10-minute warning, everybody, because I got to go walk a dog. Not my dog, my buddy's dog, but just giving you all the heads up. Would I want to stay and do more artwork for you? Absolutely. But we'll have to take a little break here for sure. Yep. No, I know. I know I got dog stuff. Gotta go hang out with a doge. Probably, yes. It's probably just been sitting out in the backyard the whole time. It does have access to a dog door, so it can do stuff at its own leisure. No! Whoop! Oh, it did the camera thing, didn't it? It did. Alright, let's see. There we go. Have I worked on any of the other models for the game? Yeah, I made the gnome female character is now in the game, so I worked on her, and then I did the wood elves, which are still going through a few drafts right now, but they're getting pretty close to being complete. Like full-on approval where like everybody's A-okay, they're full signed off, there's no request for adjustments or changes and like that, so yeah. They're looking real good now, too. Like, the feedback has been fantastic for them, you know, made those adjustments, and I think they're starting to look really, really solid, so. Kind of one of those things. All feedback is good feedback, you know. It's one of those bits where, like, you can always improve stuff, so, you know, you work on something for so long and you might not see some of the, like, real critical changes that you need to make or adjust on your models and stuff, so, yeah, it's always good to have somebody say something, just so you can, even if you're just gonna just noodle on something real quick or just make some quick adjustments on it, there's always room for improvement, for sure, so. Oh, thanks, yeah, he's bearding out right now. I still got a little bit more. There's like this little spot right here I want to like touch up, like right in this section, but overall it's getting there. He's looking pretty good. Hey, what's up, Defiant Possum? I got a little bit of bad news for you popping up in here. I've got about 5 more minutes, and I gotta go take care of a buddy's puppers. So I'm gonna have to end stream sooner than I had originally anticipated because I had forgotten I was taking care of his pupper, and so now I need to go do that. But at least you get to hang out just for a little bit. Yeah, right? I'll take you with me, and we're gonna go for a ride over to my buddy's place and then go walk a dog. Probably. That's probably not what we're here for, though. I'm here to show off art and do art and stuff. That's a whole different channel. I'd have to make a new channel for that. Zach Walks Dogs channel. I would say it's more of a skill or a talent than it is art, yes. And trust me, that isn't coming down on people that do dog walking, because like I said, it is a skill or talent. You need to be able to do that shit. You always watch those people when they're walking like 6 dogs or something. You're like, damn, dude, how do you keep track of all of them? That's good. Nice. Alrighty, y'all. I want to keep knocking this out, but yeah, I got previous engagements I got to go to attend to, so I appreciate y'all for hanging out with me for the time at which we worked through this. I think we got most of the hair completed now, which is great. The last couple of things is I want to get this cloth all painted up real nice and get that in a done state, which we're getting close to on that. But then I also wanted to go through and do some skin blemishes and stuff, and I think then we can actually pretty much put a button on this character, which is pretty cool. Very excited about that. So really appreciate y'all for stopping by, internet, and ladies and gents, thanks for hanging out with me for this evening. So hopefully I'm going to be on tomorrow, and because I don't really, besides I'll make sure that my dog stuff is taken care of prior to that, so that way it's not so weird. Anyway, I'm rambling now. Appreciate y'all for stopping by, and yeah, exactly. I want to add more like scars and beat up and just like, you know, wear and tear on this dude. So that's kind of going to be like some of the last few things that we do there. So, but yeah, thanks all. All right, later everybody.